Hi guys. All right, it's reading time. So you are going to need your reading hardback, and that's all you're going to need for today. Before we get started, we're going to talk about what is called a myth. Okay? So a myth is a traditional story that tries to explain how something came about or what something means. Okay? Myths have certain features different from regular stories. So they have animal characters that talk. They have characters that do unusual or amazing things. Now, we've had stories that had both of these. However, they're not a myth because here's an important one. This is a biggie. This characteristic here of a myth makes it a myth. Explanations about how something began or how something came to be. Okay? We have not seen anything like that yet. So that's a big one in myth. So yeah, we've seen animal characters that talk. We've also seen that characters do unusual or amazing things in some of our stories, just like Lampopo. However, in Lampopo, it didn't explain how anything came to be or how something began. So a myth is big on that, okay? So that's a big difference between a regular story and a myth. All right? So I want you to open up to page 74. Okay, page 74. And I'm going to read to you. You're going to follow along. And we're going to read Brave Measuring Worm. Okay, that's a Miwok myth retold by Robert D. Sansochi, illustrated by Christina Swarner. Now, this kind of sounds familiar, right? Okay, with two bear cubs. We had a measuring worm and bear cubs, if you can recall. So, do you think they might be similar? Probably, right? Two bear cubs was also a myth by the Miwok, right? All right, so you follow along and think about two bear cubs along with Brave Measuring Worm. Once, long ago, Mother Grizzly Bear had two cubs she loved dearly. One day, she went out to gather roots and berries. She took her cubs with her. The young bears ran here and there as they played. Their mother warned them, "Stay close to me." Does that sound familiar? The brothers ran on ahead, all the while racing, wrestling, and playing hide and seek. They forgot their mother's warning and continued further and further downriver. From a huge boulder beside the stream, they dived into the water with terrific splashes. Weary at last, they scrambled up on the big flat rock and lay down. As the warm sunshine dried them off, they fell asleep. As they dozed, the rock began to grow bigger and taller. For countless days and nights, it continued to grow. The whole time, the cubs slept on peacefully. Does that sound familiar? Yeah, there's some similarities there, right? Okay. Let's continue. While the rock grew, Mother Grizzly searched for her missing cubs. In her wandering, the bear met Gray Fox, Mother Deer, Mountain Lion, and finally, Little White-Footed Mouse. "Have you seen my cubs?" she asked each one in turn. "No," they all said, "but we will help you search for them." The searchers looked everywhere a cub might be. They searched in caves and in hollow logs. They looked in thickets and in the tops of trees. They found no trace. All right, so how do you think this story so far is similar to Bear Cub? To Two Bear Cubs, sorry. Okay. Yeah, it's kind of like the same story. How do you think it's different? Well, Two Bear Cubs was a play, right? And this is actually a story. Okay. And you probably found some other similarities and differences too. All right, let's keep going. All right, so we're on page 76. After days of searching, the creatures finally sat together to decide what they should do next. Suddenly, Red-tailed Hawk swooped down. He called to Mother Grizzly, "I have seen your cubs. They are on the granite stone, which has become a towering mountain." He continued on his way. The bear and her friends hurried to the base of what was now a wall of rock. They called and called, but the cubs slept on. Then, one by one, beginning with Mother Grizzly herself, the animals tried to climb the mountain. They tried and tried, but even Mountain Lion, the best climber of all, failed. Does that sound familiar? Yeah. Is there no one who can save my cubs? Asked poor Grizzly Bear. I will try, a small voice said. Looking down, the bear saw a little measuring worm. The Miwok call him Tu-tak-a-na, which means little curl stretch. He moves as a caterpillar moves. Most of the animals laughed at him. Even Mouse cried, "Foolish measuring worm, your name is longer than you are." Mother Grizzly picked up the tiny worm and said gratefully, "I welcome your help." So Measuring Worm began to creep up the rock. He curled himself into an arch, anchored himself with his short back legs, and then stretched out his body until his front legs could grasp another bit of stone. As he went, he marked a safe path with a silky thread, for Measuring Worm can make silk like a spider. Once Measuring Worm looked down and saw that the mighty river now seemed only a tiny band of silver. The forests and meadows looked no bigger than twigs and moss. He grew afraid and could not move at all. After a time, he found his courage again. He began to sing, "Too-talk, too-talk," which means curl, stretch, as loudly as he could, and crept still higher up the granite wall. Finally, one morning, he reached the top of the vast stone. He softly whispered into the ears of the two cubs, "Wake up!" And there he is, if you can see him on the side of the mountain here, climbing. Yeah. All right, page 78. When the two cubs saw how high up they were, they began to cry. Measuring Worm comforted them. "Follow me," he said, "for I have marked a safe path with my thread." "We are afraid we will fall," wailed the two little bears. Measuring Worm challenged them. "Are the sons of Mother Grizzly, the bravest of animals, such cowards?" he asked. Then, to show Tu-tak-a-na how brave they were, the cubs started down on their own. "Wait!" cried the worm. "You must let me lead. There are many dangerous places where great care must be taken." Just then, some loose gravel slipped out from under younger brother's paw. Older brother grabbed him and pulled him to safety. Measuring Worm moved carefully over the loose gravel. He insisted, "You must let me go first. My thread will be our guide, but I remember what danger lies in wait." This time the cubs heeded him. As they made their slow, careful way down the rock wall, Measuring Worm pointed out other places where stones were loose or the edge of the path was crumbling. When they complained about how sore their paws and empty bellies, he promised them they would soon be safe with their mother again. Measuring Worm even stood his ground against bad-tempered Rattlesnake, who blocked their path. The snake shook his rattle and coiled himself back as if ready to strike. The cubs were afraid, but brave Measuring Worm, small as he was, spoke loudly. "Snake, I have promised to return these cubs to Mother Grizzly. Let us by, and the creatures of the valley will know that you are a friend." Rattlesnake, surprised by the bravery of Little Worm, drew aside to let them pass. Measuring Worm thanked Rattlesnake and led the little bears on. They still had a long way to go, but the worst dangers were past. At last the cubs and their rescuer reached the valley floor. Then how joyfully Mother Grizzly gathered her cubs to her heart and hugged them. Then all the animals decided to call the rock Tu-tak-a-nula, which means Measuring Worm's stone. This was in honor of the heroic worm who had done what no other creature could do. The towering stone kept this name for many years until newcomers renamed it El Capitan. All right, so there you go. That's the story of Brave Measuring Worm. So let's take a look at page 80. We're going to talk about the comparing our texts. So comparing Brave Measuring Worm and Two Bear Cubs. Think about the bear cub's journey. Now, we're only talking about the journeys down the hill, okay? So down the mountain in Two Bear Cubs and Brave Measuring Worm. How are the journeys alike? How are they different? So just about the journeys, not about the story themselves. I just want to know what are the similarities of their journeys down the mountain. Okay, so think about both stories and just the journey part. Okay. All right, well, in both of them, the measuring worm led them down, right? Okay, so they both came down with measuring worm. Nobody else were able to get up the mountain, so no one else could lead them down. Okay, so in both journeys, Brave Measuring Worm led them down to safety. Okay, how about some differences? What do you see as differences? Well, in Brave Measuring Worm, there was a rattlesnake. Do you remember a rattlesnake in Two Bear Cubs? No, there was no rattlesnake in Two Bear Cubs, so they kind of added that to Brave Measuring Worm. Okay. How would you feel if you were Measuring Worm? Would you feel proud of yourself? Maybe. Okay. Would you feel like you succeeded? Yeah. Okay. You'd be happy with yourself. You would be grateful that you could help someone out. Okay. And number 3, what did you learn from Two Bear Cubs? Well, we learned about the Miwok people, right? Okay. And we learned that they told stories of how things came to be. So they believe that mountains, this is how mountains came to be and how mountains began. We know today that that's not true, right? Mountains don't grow out of stones. Okay. However, we do know that mountains can form by earthquakes, right? Okay. We've talked about earthquakes with the plates come together and then they can build up into a mountain. Okay. When they crash together, they crumble and then they build up. Okay. So yeah, so we have talked about how mountains came to be. They don't just grow like a plant, right, out of a stone. Okay. All right. So yeah. All right. I'm going to send you in an assignment in a note, okay, one of those notes, questions, and I want you to answer the questions according to Brave Measuring Worm, okay? All right, so just send me back those questions, those answers when you're finished, okay? All right, guys, if you have any questions, let me know. Bye for now.